Back in 1777 to 1778, George Washington and his crew had it rough at Valley Forge. The winter was brutal, and they had to face some seriously harsh conditions. But guess what? They came out the other side even stronger and better equipped to fight. That time at Valley Forge is often seen as a major turning point in the war. Hey there! Today's video is all about the American Revolutionary War and how America won its independence. We'll be diving into all the interesting details, so make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on more amazing historical content from around the world. The Revolutionary War's underlying causes. Did you know that the American Revolution didn't just happen overnight? In fact, the colonists and British authorities were at odds with each other for more than a decade before the Revolution even started in 1775. It all started during the French and Indian War, which ended up giving the Crown more land. But with that came more taxes, which the people weren't too thrilled about. Then, the British started implementing even more taxes on the colonies with things like the Stamp Act, Townshend Acts, and Tea Act. But the colonists were ticked off because they didn't have a say in it. Can you imagine being taxed for things without having any say in the matter? Yeah, it's no wonder they were so angry. These taxes sparked a lot of outrage among the colonists, who believed that they should be able to govern themselves and make their own decisions. The British authorities, on the other hand, believed that they had the right to tax the colonies in order to pay for the war and maintain control over them. This anger led to violence in 1770 during the Boston Massacre, when British soldiers shot and killed 5 colonists. Then, in 1773, people in Boston dumped a lot of tea into the harbor during the Boston Tea Party to protest taxes. Parliament got mad and passed some laws called the Intolerable Acts to regain power over Massachusetts. Interesting fact: Benedict Arnold, who later became infamous for betraying the American cause, was actually one of the first heroes of the Revolutionary War. He helped lead rebel forces in the capture of Fort Ticonderoga in May of 1775. As tensions between the colonists and British authorities continued to escalate, a group of fiery colonial delegates, including the likes of George Washington, John and Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, and John Jay, gathered in Philadelphia in September of 1774 to give voice to their grievances against the British Crown. They didn't shy away from denouncing the unjust taxation and military presence in the colonies without their consent. This gathering, known as the First Continental Congress, issued a declaration of the fundamental rights every citizen should have, including the right to life, liberty, property, assembly, and trial by jury. Even though they did not call for full independence from Britain, they vowed to meet again in May of 1775 to discuss further action. Nonetheless, before that could happen, events took a dramatic turn. In the dead of night on April 18, 1775, hundreds of British troops marched from Boston to nearby Concord, Massachusetts, intent on seizing an arms cache. But thanks to the brave actions of Paul Revere and other riders, colonial militiamen were quickly alerted and began mobilizing to intercept the Redcoats. The next day, April 19, 1775, local militia and British soldiers clashed in the battles of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. It was a brutal confrontation that marked the start of the Revolutionary War, and the shot heard round the world echoed across the colonies, sparking a fire that would ultimately lead to American independence. Declaration of Independence, 1775 to 1776. In 1775, something incredible happened in Philadelphia. The Second Continental Congress gathered to create a formidable army led by none other than the legendary George Washington. The newly formed army soon engaged in its first major battle in June, and though they didn't come out on top, they managed to deal a significant blow to the British. Despite initial setbacks, Washington's forces persevered in their struggle to keep the British stuck in Boston, and their efforts were ultimately rewarded when they secured some powerful artillery from Fort Ticonderoga. The tables turned dramatically, and the British were forced to abandon Boston in March of 1776, retreating to Canada to prepare for an invasion of New York. By this time, the colonists were more determined than ever to gain their independence, and in July of 1776, Congress voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence. How fascinating! The Revolutionary War's turning point was at Saratoga, 1777 to 1778. Back in 1777, the British had a sneaky plan to defeat the American rebels. They wanted to split the colonies and isolate New England, the region with the most support for the rebellion. To make it happen, General Burgoyne led his army south from Canada to meet with General Howe's forces on the Hudson River. Meanwhile, Howe himself headed south to confront Washington near Chesapeake Bay. Things were going well for the British. They managed to retake Fort Ticonderoga, score a big victory over the Americans at Brandywine Creek, and even enter Philadelphia. But Washington wasn't about to give up without a fight. He surprised the British by attacking Germantown and then retreated to Valley Forge for winter quarters. The American Revolution was at a critical point in 1777. The British were implementing their master plan, but fate intervened. Howe's move left Burgoyne's army exposed, and the Americans took advantage. They fought 2 epic battles at Saratoga and won despite the odds. It was a game-changer for the Revolution because France saw the potential of the cause and joined the fight against Great Britain. What started as a local squabble between Britain and its colonies turned into a global struggle for independence. Battle in the South, Deadlock in the North, 1778 to 1781. Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a Prussian military officer who the French sent, trained and disciplined George Washington's troops during the challenging winter at Valley Forge. Additionally, the leadership of Marquis de Lafayette, a French aristocrat, helped boost the morale and cohesion of the troops. In June of 1778, British forces under Sir Henry Clinton tried to retreat from Philadelphia to New York, but Washington's army attacked them near Monmouth, New Jersey. Although the battle was ultimately a draw, the Americans were able to hold their ground while Clinton safely got his army and supplies to New York. The Comte d'Estaing's French fleet arrived off the Atlantic coast in July and got ready to fight the British. Moreover, a joint attack on the British at Newport, Rhode Island in late July was unsuccessful, leading to a stalemate in the North for much of the war. From 1779 to 1781, the American Revolution hit some rough patches. One of their top generals, Benedict Arnold, switched sides and joined the British, and there were even mutinies in the Continental Army. Meanwhile, the British were making progress in the South, taking over Georgia and Charleston, South Carolina. They also defeated American troops under Gates at Camden, but the Americans had a win against Loyalist forces at Kings Mountain. In December of 1780, Nathaniel Greene took over as American commander in the South, and his troops scored a victory at Cowpens, South Carolina in January of 1781, thanks to the leadership of General Daniel Morgan against a British force led by Colonel Banastre Tarleton. The end of the Revolutionary War, 1781 to 1783. So, things were not looking good for the British by the fall of 1781. Greene's American forces had managed to corner Cornwallis and his troops on Virginia's Yorktown Peninsula, with Washington and his army closing in. Therefore, a General Rochambeau-led French army and fleet of 36 French warships offshore were preventing any British reinforcement or evacuation. With no way out, Cornwallis was forced to surrender his entire army on October 19th. Even though he claimed he was sick and sent his deputy, Charles O'Hara, to surrender, it was all over. Washington gave the nod to his own deputy, Benjamin Lincoln, who accepted the sword. The Battle of Yorktown was a major win for the American independence movement, but it wasn't the final nail in the coffin just yet. The British still had a stronghold in New York, and troops stationed in Charleston posed a threat. However, things took a turn in 1782 when the British began to remove their troops from Charleston and Savannah. Negotiations in Paris followed, and the signing of the Treaty of Paris on September 3, 1783, marked the official recognition of the United States independence by Great Britain. The conflict that lasted for 8 long years had finally come to a close, with Britain signing separate peace treaties with France and Spain as well. It was a historic moment that brought an end to a long and challenging struggle for the American people. Thank you for joining us today to explore the exhilarating journey of the Revolutionary War in America. I hope you found it engaging to learn about this remarkable history. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications to stay updated on our upcoming videos.